Welcome to the Mind Muscle Radio podcast. I am your host, Aaron Schiavone, personal trainer, online coach. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a very common topic that I get a lot from a lot of people, including a lot of my clients. And that's that they struggle to get enough calories in to build the muscle that they want. And this goes really deep. This goes down to the psychological factors that a lot of women struggle with, especially of gaining weight and eating more, because you've always been told to be small and be skinny, and you shouldn't be eating more, and you shouldn't be having muscles, as well as just the difficulty of physically eating more food. So we're going to dive into all of that and show you guys just some ways to get around it, to better help you prepare for eating more, to build muscle, to get the result you want. So ultimately, there are a few things more frustrating than training hard and not seeing the gains that you want from all the hard work that you're putting in, right? That's really fucking annoying. It pisses me off when it happens to me. It pisses my clients off when it happens to them. It pisses me off when it happens to my clients. And when I hear people complaining about it all the time, right? Because you are not going to get the result you want if you don't eat. It's the harsh truth. I know a lot of people will make you believe that you can build muscle without a calorie surplus or without getting adequate protein and calories and carbs in, but really you can't unless you're very, very new to the gym and you've never trained before. You're going to have a hard time building muscle without putting in the extra calories. So whenever you hear people being like, you can lose fat and build muscle at the same time, and you can shrink your waist and build your booty at the same time. You can't. For 99% of you, that ain't happening. And one of the other things that I tend to get a lot, from women I speak to and my clients is physically eating that much food can be uncomfortable, can lead to, feeling obviously full and bloated. And that psychological challenge of trying to force in more food when you're not hungry. It is hard. I have been there many times before when I have bulked up, physically to try to get this food in. We're I'm not hungry, but I have to eat and I have to do it. And you're just ugh, it is a chore. I get that. Most of you are never really going to be on high enough calories for it to be really horrendous. Trust me, when you're eating 3, 4, 5,000 calories a day, that is fucking work. But eating between 2 and 3,000, it's still work, but it's not that hard. You just need to make the right choices with what you're eating, and we will kind of discuss that as we go through this. Another common issue is the lack of time to prepare food. Get that a lot. We're all busy. We don't have hours and hours a day to be prepping food, or necessarily have half a Sunday to be prepping everything for a week. Again, that's where just being prepared with the right kinds of foods does come in handy. And then it's also eating all that food across the day, right? If you're having to eat 4, 5, 6 meals, so 3 or 4 meals plus some snacks a day to get all the calories in, for a lot of people at work and a busy job and parents and stuff, that is also very hard to do. And again, you'll quite often be feeling not hungry or you're always eating. So again, I acknowledge that is a pain in the ass. I think as well for a lot of women, there is the difficulty of kind of seeing food as a task, or it kind of becomes a chore as part of the growth process. A lot of women have a very fragile relationship with food, and to kind of turn it into something that it becomes a task or a chore can be quite triggering and can be quite damaging for some women. So again, that's something we need to be aware of, especially if you've spent a lot of time maintaining or dieting, to then switch to trying to grow can be a bit of a mental fuck. It's a bit of a mind fuck, right? And another thing we have to deal with when it comes to the food is the whole relationship that people have with good versus bad, clean versus dirty, right? When we're dieting, sure, we want things to be as clean as possible. We want it to be high volume to keep you full. But when we're trying to build muscle, that can actually kind of go against us. And to be honest, you're probably looking at wanting to eat higher calorie, lower volume foods so that you can eat more and get the calories in, but not feel as massively full and stuffed as you would. So we can't talk about food intake without talking about calories. And yes, we are going to have to talk about calories and macros, something I'm sure many of you are sick to death of because it's all personal trainers and coaches talk about, but that's because it's important. Right? It's like a weatherman telling you about the wind and the rain, okay? It matters. Even though you hear it every day, it's important to know these things. So the first thing that we need to kind of have an understanding of is TDEE, right? That's total daily energy expenditure. That is, in the simplest terms, all the calories that you consume in a day to do everything that you do, from sleeping and moving and going to the gym to going to the bathroom, blinking, breathing, everything, right? All the calories that you need. Now, I'm not going to go into the math of how to work that out here. If you want to figure that out, I have a calorie calculator on my website, or just message me on Instagram, whatever, I can work them out for you. Or frankly, just Google calorie calculator and that can work out your TDEE for you. We don't need to do the math here because that's boring as shit to watch and listen to. But what I want to emphasize is that when it comes to building muscle, a calorie surplus is a non-negotiable. Okay, we need to be eating in a calorie surplus to build muscle. And that could be anywhere from 200 to 500 calories or more above your TDEE, right? If you're not in a surplus, you're not going to grow. You're either going to stay the same or you're going to shrink, right? You're going to lose weight. Muscle growth takes calories, takes protein, takes carbs. So you have to be in a surplus. And the simple fact is, most of you who are trying to grow and aren't growing are probably not eating enough calories. And a lot of that will come down to the fear of gaining weight, because trust me, I see that all the time. The number of people I speak to, the number of clients I have where they're like, I want to build a butt, I want to build muscle. And you're like, cool, we can do that. And you start ramping up their calories a bit, and then they start seeing a little bit of weight gain, and maybe a little bit goes on the waist, and they go up a pound or two, and they shit the bed. And they're like, oh my God, I'm getting fat. Oh, my waist has got bigger, and ooh, my thighs have got bigger, but my bum's barely got bigger. I'm like, well, yeah, you're going to gain some weight. You're going to gain some fat. And they're like, oh no, I don't like it. Oh, can we go on a cut? Can we go on a diet? And then you're like, oh, fine. But you end up just back trapped in this circle. You want to build the butt. You want to gain some weight and build some muscle, but you're terrified to physically do it and see the scale go up, because to you, the scale going up is bad, right? That's what you've always been taught. Your value is based on what you weigh on the scale and nothing more. But the scale is going to have to go up, right? If you want to build muscle, muscle weighs something. If you're building more of it, that means you are going to weigh more. Weight's going to go up. You have to deal with it. You have to accept it. If you don't, you will not see progress. You will not change, ever. I really want to emphasize that. If you're not willing to put yourself into that uncomfortable position for a short period of time, nothing's going to change. Right? But any fat that you do gain in a building or bulking process, you don't keep that. You will diet that off again down the line to unveil all the new muscle and the sexy new body you've got. But if you're not willing to do it, then quite frankly, what are you doing? You're not going to get the progress you want. You're not going to build the butt. You're not going to have any muscle because you're not willing to get uncomfortable with it, right? Growth can be uncomfortable. Suck it up. Deal with it. Get on with it. Wrapping back around to food. Now I'm done with my little rant. We need to think about protein, right? And protein intake. So that's one of the most important things we need to consider in this calorie surplus is how much protein we're getting. Simple way to do it without, again, me complicating it with lots of maths is whatever you weigh in pounds, have that many grams of protein per day. So if you weigh 130 pounds, you have 130 grams protein. Kilos, just double it, essentially. So if you weigh 70 kilos, you have 140 grams of protein, right? So it gives you a pretty good ballpark. If you're in that area, if you're in that range, you're doing pretty good, right? But that's the most important thing you need to be aiming for, right? Because protein is the building blocks of muscle. So if we want more muscle, we need to give it the blocks to build it, right? It's like, it's like Lego. If you want to build a house made of Lego, but, all you've got is like a handful of bricks, well, you're not going to build a house, right? You need more bricks to build the house, right? That's the protein that builds the muscle. But we also need to make sure that we're getting carbs in, because a lot of people really underestimate the role and power of carbs in muscle building. I would say, quite honestly, I think carbs are more important than protein for growth, because the carbs are the fuel. It's what your body uses to energize itself to grow, right? It's got the building blocks. That's great. So think of, going back to our Lego analogy. We're trying to build our house. We've got enough blocks now. That's our protein, but it's not going to build itself. Your hands are the carbs. So you use your hands, your carbohydrates, to put the protein in place to build the house, right? It's all tied together. Protein and carbs, they matter. So please stop being a scared little bitch when it comes to carbohydrates, right? Carbs don't make you fat. They're not evil. They're not bad for you. They're not going to cause you cancer and all these other stupid things. You hear these dumb fuck wannabe fitness influencers tell you online, and the scaremongers and the charlatans who just talk utter shit. Carbohydrates are fine. What makes you fat is an overabundance of calories in total. Typically, yeah, that's probably going to come from carbs and fat, because our diets, especially in the West, are made up of a shit ton of processed, low quality carbohydrates and fats, right? White breads, baked goods, and pastas, and rice, and pastries, and cereals, and blah, 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 all that stuff. But it's just because you're eating too much of it that makes you fat, not the fact that you are eating it, right? So carbs and protein are important. Eat them. Get enough of them, prioritize them. So in order to get these things in, right, we want to be focusing on, to get these things in, we want to be focusing on foods that, have a lot of calories in a small serving, right? So the opposite of what we do when we're dieting, right? Dieting is all about low calorie, high volume. Bulking is more about high calorie, low volume. So this is where it's amazing to be eating things like nuts and seeds and nut butters, like almond butter and peanut butter, using oils and things like olive oil and avocado oil and coconut oil, eating things like dried fruit and full fat dairy. So we don't need to be going for, the fat-free stuff. We want the fat. We want those extra calories. We don't want to have to put in as much food to be, eating as we do when we're dieting. As well, more fast-acting carbohydrates, going for things like white rice rather than, say, a brown rice, because it digests quicker, is actually going to make you feel hungrier sooner, which will stimulate your appetite more, which will make it easier to eat more calories, right? There's lots of ways we can do just little hacks like that. So think high calorie, low volume. That's the simplest way. And basically you just have to not be afraid of the things you normally would be afraid of if you're trying to lose weight. Basically. Two sort of simple examples would be putting like a tablespoon of olive oil on top of a meal. So on top of some pasta or on top of a steak or on top of a salad, right? Whatever you're eating, little drizzle. Good olive oil, a good healthy fat. Or when you're having your protein shake, blend it up and put some peanut butter in it and some oats. Right, a great way to make a really good high calorie shake is whole milk, peanut butter, oats, maybe a banana. Blend that up with your protein powder of choice, and you've got a banging protein shake that's going to pack in a ton of calories, but it's really easy to eat. Great little tip, actually. When it comes to blending up a protein shake, you've probably noticed that they get really thick and airy and can be super hard to digest, and you feel quite full after them. That's because you're putting in the protein and then blending it all up and it gets all aerated and thick. Top tip, blend everything up without the protein powder in it. So it's the consistency you want. Then at the end, pop your protein powder in and then blend for 2-3 seconds just to mix it together. Then you get a great high calorie protein shake, but that doesn't have that huge amount of physical volume. Much easier to drink. Top tip, remember that, you learned it here first. So that's really the power of liquid calories, right? Again, when it comes to fat loss, we're always talking about avoid liquid calories, avoid liquid calories. When we're trying to build, liquid calories are your friend. Shakes and things are so much easier to use and drink than, like whole meals, and using things like whole milk rather than like a skimmed milk or a plant-based milk makes it easier. And just banging a whole load of high calorie things into a shake, like a weight gainer shake, great. This is one of these things I use all the time with my shift workers, like my nurses and doctors. I'll be like, right, you don't get a lot of time to eat. You don't get a lot of time to stop. And you tell me that you quite often go hours and hours and hours without eating, or you won't eat at all on a night shift. So I get them to make these big high calorie shakes, and then they just keep it at the desk, wherever they go past the most often, and they can just grab a mouthful or two of it. And before you know it, across, a 12-hour night shift, they could put 700, 800, 900, 1,000 calories down quite easily without ever having to stop and eat. They can just do it mouthful by mouthful, which is still better than, when they just don't eat anything or just survive on crap and junk food. So it's a great tip, especially for shift workers. Another thing we can do is what we call calorie stacking. And this is basically just snacks, but little high calorie snacks between meals. So you're going to have your main meals where you get the bulk of your food. But the snacks between, again, we want them to be high protein, relatively high calorie. We can go for stuff that's a little bit more high fat. So things like nuts, handful of almonds, peanut butter on top of something, slices of cheese, stuff like that, can be good options to get in just to help you get the protein up a bit, but also get your calories and your fats up. So we'd get those total calories in quite easily, but they're quite, small volume. A handful of nuts, it's not a lot of food, but you can get a couple of hundred calories packed into a small handful of nuts, and that makes it easy. But it's a good source of food, right? It's packed full of healthy fats, packed full of vitamins and minerals, all that good stuff, and, a reasonable amount of protein. So another thing to kind of talk about would be meal timing. Now, meal timing could be a whole podcast, and probably will be a whole podcast like on its own as to the importance of like meal timing and pre and post-workout nutrition. But post-workout nutrition is very important, right? This is where we can get all the nutrients in that we need to start to recover and repair from a workout. And a lot of people won't do it. You'd be surprised how many people will be in a personal training and fitness situation who don't have a pre-workout meal. They don't have a proper post-workout meal. They'll just maybe have a protein shake. Some people just don't do anything at all, but it is important to get some food in after. Now, you don't have to be, right, we're not gym bros. We're not worried about anabolic windows, which is like this mythical 60-minute window after a workout where you have to get some protein in, right? We know that's not true, right? We know that's bullshit these days. But within 1 to 2 hours or so, you're probably going to want a decent meal, a decent chunk of protein and carbohydrates. I would say typically I'd recommend to my clients that they be getting somewhere in the region of 30 grams of protein and 40 to 50 grams of carbs, within 1 to 2 hours after a workout. So you want like a good sizable meal, and you're going to be hungry. If you train properly, you're going to be hungry. Your body's going to want it. It's going to be very easy for you to eat that. So always think about a post-workout meal. And that's why sometimes it can be good to figure out when you want to go to the gym, because if you can do it to base it around about, when you're going to have your breakfast or your lunch or your evening meal, if you can go after work at 5 and then you're going to have your dinner at 7, perfect. Well, other than the fact you're going to the gym at the worst possible time, when it's going to be full of broccoli-haired fucking gym bros and idiots. But if it's when you have to train, that's when you have to train. But, if you can do it at lunchtime, you can, then you can go and have your lunch right after. That is the perfect sort of setup. So if you can do that, great. If not, then having a post-workout meal prepared to eat after you've trained is going to make you feel 1,000 times better, and it is going to make your whole growth process so much easier. Trust me. And the final thing, from a nutrient timing point of view would be, late night snacks. That one thing you've always been told your entire life to avoid. Don't eat late. Don't eat before bed, because you're just going to turn to fat, right? That's the myth you've probably all heard. If you eat before you go to bed, your body can't use it, so it's just going to turn to fat, right? That is not true. Your body does the majority of its growth and repair overnight while you're asleep. So it's pulling all that nutrients in, that you've taken throughout the day to help rebuild the muscle, right? You don't build muscle in the gym. You build muscle when you're asleep. You build muscle when you're sitting on your ass doing nothing on your recovery days. You don't build it in the gym. So eating before bed is actually not a bad idea, right? There's plenty of research that shows us that if you have a decent amount of protein before you go to bed, it can help to keep your what's called muscle protein synthesis, which is the production and creation of new muscle tissue. It can keep that revved up for another 6 or 7 hours. That's almost your entire night's sleep. So if you've fed yourself some protein and some carbs before bed, and you've trained that day, your body's going, yes, nom, 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 nom. I'm going to turn this into lovely muscle. You want your butt to get bigger? That's when it's going to do it, when you're asleep and you're well fed. So do not be afraid to eat later at night, before you go to bed. Now, you might want something like a more slow digesting protein, like a casein protein rather than a whey, or something like, eggs, cottage cheese, fucking baby sick. But, that kind of slow digesting, dairy protein or egg protein is the kind of thing that you want, rather than say a whey protein, and some complex carbohydrates to kind of give you a slow release overnight. So I think stuff more like, some wholemeal bread or oats or something, rather than something like cereal. Not that there's anything wrong with eating cereal while you're growing, but as long as your stomach can handle it, doesn't give you any digestive issues, it's definitely worth giving yourself a final calorie boost before bed. All this is kind of a waste of time if we're not being accurate about it, right? So just when you're dieting, it's important to be tracking your calorie intake, right? It's like saving for a life plan, right? You want to buy a house. You need to know how much money you've got coming in every month to, build up your savings to be able to save, to invest and buy a house, right? You got to know your incomings and your outgoings. Building muscle is exactly the same, because what we don't want is to set our expectations of, say, we want to buy a house that costs £1,000,000, but you're only making like £1,000 a month, and that money's coming in and it's building up. But then when you look at the end of a year, you go, oh, I've only got £12,000 and I needed £1 million. Well, then you should have been paying more attention to that so that you were saving and building and bringing in more to have saved enough, right? To build for what you want. It's the same, right? Don't guess your calories. Do not guess your intake. I hear it from people all the time, like, oh, I think I'm getting enough. Well, do you think or do you know? There's a very big fucking difference between thinking and knowing. If you want to know, you have to track it and you have to pay attention. And again, I get fed up with people who are like, oh, tracking's obsessive, or I don't like tracking. I'm like, well, you don't like getting results then, because it is the best tool that we have. It is the most accurate tool that we have. If you want to be able to see results and you're not willing to track again and put the work in, don't expect to get a good result as you want for the effort you're putting in. Now, it's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you're not tracking your lifts, or you're not tracking the weights you're doing, and you're not trying to progress those every week, and you're paying attention to it, and you're just going and training, and then you moan that you're not seeing a result, well, that's why. You're not putting in the work. Most of you, frankly, honestly, don't put in the work. You don't train hard enough. You don't eat hard enough. You don't track your training. You don't track your diet. You moan about the fact that you have to, but then you moan about the fact you don't have the body you want and you hate yourself. Do the work. Do the work. All the people you look up to and envy, we do the work. I've been tracking my training for 20 years. I've been tracking my food on and off, especially when I need to, for 12, 15 years, right? If you want the result, you just have to do the work. The ones who do, the ones who follow, the ones you lust over and envy, we do the work. If you want the result, please do the fucking work, right? All right, we've got to make sure we're accurate. We've got to make sure we're logging. We've got to make sure we're paying attention. And it's, even if you just do it for a few weeks and then you kind of just continue to then eat the same thing over and over and over and over, which again is kind of part of the secret that most people don't talk about, is that, again, most of us who get the results, who have the bodies you want, who are the fittest and the healthiest, we just eat the same stuff, really. Same breakfast, same lunches, same dinners, rinse and repeat. Very simple. I have pretty much the same breakfast every day. I have, the same couple of lunches most days. I mix up the flavors and stuff a bit, but I keep it similar. So it's kind of predictable. That's the secret, right? Predictable, easy food. That's easy to prep. That's quick to prep, good to stay on a budget. And you can make it so it's easier for you to eat because you're kind of always keeping it the same. You're not mixing it up too much. But just that consistency, it really, it's so simple. I just wish more people would kind of like get it into their heads. That's all it needs to be. All right? Because building muscle is a long game. It's a slow process. Again, please stop listening to all these fitness influencers and 20-year-old girls on Instagram who are like, I blew up my glutes. I 10x'd my glutes and it took me 2 months. Or, hey, I added 6 inches to my ass in 3 months. I'm like, they probably didn't. That amount of muscle growth in that amount of time, naturally, without drugs, you have to be a rare beast indeed to grow that. Most of you, to get the results you want, need a solid 12 months of just pure growth, and then probably several more years after that to really get the body you want. The coaches who will show you this, and there are plenty out there, will be very transparent about it. Now, this client, it took, 2 or 3 years of progress that you're seeing, not 2 or 3 months, right? Please stop believing that. Please stop buying into these plans that these girls sell because you think you're going to get an arse like them in a couple of months from doing their program. Doesn't happen. For a very, very small fraction of you, it may happen. But the reason you see only a couple of progress results on these pages from the people that they work with, from the thousands and thousands of people who buy their programs, is because for most people, it doesn't work. It doesn't yield the result that they promise, right? It's a slow, long, agonizing game of work and consistency to build muscle. You're not going to build it overnight. You're not building lots of it in a couple of months. You are not going to get bulky. You are not going to look like a man. It's so insulting how many women think that it's just going to happen and that it's something that just doesn't take that much effort. It's insulting to the women who have achieved it for the sheer amount of work and effort and time and consistency and sacrifice that goes into building that kind of physique. And it's kind of insulting to me because I've been trying to look manly for like 25 years. And I still don't feel particularly big or bulky, right? It's so much harder and slower than you think. I wouldn't worry about it. One big day of eating doesn't fix weeks of under eating, right? You got to be consistent with it for a long time. As I kind of mentioned, but we were talking through earlier, right? You got to be monitoring your progress. You got to be tracking your lifting. You got to be seeing that you're consistently getting stronger, because that's one of the best metrics that we're making progress and you're building muscles. Am I getting stronger? Am I able to lift more in the gym than I did the week before? And that can be physically more weight, or it could be that you did more reps, or that you're able to add some extra sets, or you were able to do something like a little bit more challenging than you could before, right? Progressive overload, one of the most important things about training in the gym, doesn't always have to be adding more weight. It could be like 1 week you did 5 reps. Then the next week you're able to do 6 reps, then 7 reps. Then maybe you increase the weight. But you need to be tracking that kind of stuff to make sure that you are increasing your strength. You're gaining weight. Another great way to tell is if you're getting sick pumps, if you're getting a really sick pump at the gym, that's usually a good sign that you're fueled up properly. Your muscles are working, your body's growing, right? Don't chase a pump. We're not chasing like booty pumps here, but if you're able to get like a really good pump from training, that is a good sign that you're making some good progress. But the final thing to kind of talk about is that eating more food does get easier over time. Right? Your body adapts to the higher intake. It will change and regulate your hormones that tell you whether you're hungry and how full you're feeling. They will kind of down-regulate a bit so that you are able to get more food in without feeling fuller. Your stomach will expand a little bit because you'll be able to. You'll have more muscle mass and you'll be training harder, so you have a physically larger demand for calories. So your body will be like, yes, give it to me, feed me. And it just becomes easier and becomes much more instinctive that you just have to eat that much. It's just a natural, adaptable, like evolutionary process that you will kind of go through. But it is a bit uncomfortable to start. If you're finding it uncomfortable, maybe you have pushed it a little bit too far, too fast. If you're finding it uncomfortable, maybe you are trying to eat too clean, like too many whole grains and too much fruits and vegetables and things, and not enough like healthy but higher calorie options. It is doable, but it's never comfortable. You speak to any of the girls and guys who you see in the gym, athletes and bodybuilders and things, who, have these physiques, they're not going to be like, oh, eating so easy. I really enjoy eating 9,000 calories a day, right? Nobody really enjoys it. It's a fucking ball ache and it is an effort. But to get the physique you want, it is just part of the process. So I'm hoping this has maybe enlightened you a little bit. Hopefully it's made you think about how to start to get more calories in so that you're not struggling to eat the food you need. You're not struggling to eat the protein that you are wanting to get in. Actually, on that point, I will add one more thing. Protein being something that people really struggle to get enough of in, a very simple way to get more protein in is to just think, what proteins am I already eating day to day, right? And just simply increase the portion size of those proteins, right? So you don't need to find new protein sources. You don't need to add different meats or different fish or different kinds of dairy. You just need to be like, right, if I'm having 1 scoop of whey protein a day, I'm going to have 2. If I'm having 200 grams of chicken, I'm going to have 300 grams of chicken. If I'm having 300 grams of beef, I'll have 400 grams of beef. If I'm having 2 eggs, I'm going to have 4 eggs, right? Just increase the protein from the protein sources you currently eat, and you will very easily reach your protein target. It's really not that hard, but people overcomplicate it, thinking, well, I need to add in a different supplement or start eating protein bars. You don't need supplements. You don't need protein bars. Just eat bigger portions of the protein you already eat and build your meals around protein, right? When you think about what I'm eating, you think protein source first, then the carbs, and then the fats, right? But build around protein and you are sorted. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you're watching it on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe because that really helps the channel to grow. If you're listening to this on one of your favorite podcast platforms, please don't forget to give me a follow. It's going to help to grow this podcast since it's so baby fresh and new.